Morning or good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. This is Larry Magid, and this is about to be an episode of Connect Safely Live. I'm actually going to speak for about 20 more seconds ahead of the actual program because the folks that are watching on Facebook have about a 15 to 30 second lag. So I'm going to go another 10 seconds while the lag catches up. But in the meantime, a special welcome to our Zoom fans and also anybody who happens to be watching on Facebook Live, if indeed they are now online. So good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you are in the country, and welcome to the second episode of Connect Safely Live, being simulcast on both Facebook and Zoom. And if you're watching us on Facebook, you can comment on Facebook, or you can join us on Zoom if you'd like to participate, ask questions, etc. Our regular website that links to everything is simply ConnectSafely.org/live. I'm Larry Magid, and I have two great guests today. Tom Edwards is with the U.S. Secret Service, the special agent in charge of the San Francisco field office. He oversees the office daily investigative and protective missions throughout Northern California, and his office sponsors the Electronics Crimes Task Force. I think many people know that the Secret Service got its origins from the Treasury Department, and I believe until the Homeland Security Administration came online, it was still part of Treasury, and its initial role was not to protect the president, but to protect the currency. And now, of course, it's best known for not only protecting the president, but other dignitaries, candidates, etc., but it also protects our money. And of course, currency is no longer just dollar bills or $100 bills. It's all forms of electronic credit, electronic funds transfer, and of course, credit cards and debit cards. And speaking of credit cards and debit cards, we're also joined by Lori Hodges, who is the Vice President and Head of U.S. Risk Service for Visa North America. Visa, as you know, is one of the leading credit and debit card issuers and is very much at the forefront of fighting financial fraud because often credit cards are what bad guys try to steal and misuse. She's engaged to consult with U.S. issuers of Visa cards and processors and group providers on risk trends and fraud management. So I want to welcome both of you. You both have a very important role to play in protecting us against the financial crimes that we worry about, especially during times of crisis. Tom, I want to begin with you. If you could explain why it is that during this COVID period, we need to be especially concerned with financial fraud.
Well, Larry, thanks for having us on the second podcast here on your live stream. It's a pleasure. The reason that fraudsters take advantage of disasters such as COVID-19 is that they've done it before. They did it for Sandy. They did it for Katrina. They're always at the ready to jump into circumstances where people are vulnerable or desperate for money. And these times are just ideal for them right now in a lot of different ways.
Lori, do you want to add to that from the perspective of a credit debit card issuer?
Yeah, absolutely. Fraudsters, this is nothing new. Fraudsters have been at this for quite some time, as Tom mentioned. I think where we see them now is that the level of sophistication has increased substantially, and with the number of breaches that have occurred from all kinds of businesses, government, health insurance, merchants, processors, etc., and the payment card space, there's an enormous amount of data out there, and this is a ripe opportunity, and the guard is down with consumers when they're in emergency situations.
And speaking of that, and speaking of Tom, you mentioned vulnerable and desperate. Not only are the fraudsters perhaps desperate, maybe they're out in force because this is an opportunity for them and they're trying to get money, but it strikes me that many people, many consumers are desperate to get goods that may not be available. I'll give you an example. Somebody I know was shopping for zinc lozenges, and as you may know, zinc lozenges are very hard to come by because, true or not true, I don't know, but some scientist wrote a paper arguing that they could have a protective role. Whether that's true or not is another issue, but it caused a huge demand for zinc lozenges. And so you couldn't find them on Amazon, you couldn't find them at Walgreens, you couldn't find them at iHerb, which is a reputable seller of herbs and medicines and things, not medicines, but vitamins, things of that nature. But this person did find them on a site that she had never heard of, went ahead and ordered them. And I remember as soon as she told me, I said, wait a minute, why is this particular company the only company on the internet apparently that has zinc lozenges when no one else has them? To me, that was a red flag. And so I did a little research. I Googled spam and the name of the company, found a lot of complaints, tried calling them, got voicemail, and basically started making sure that this person's credit card hadn't been charged. In fact, it hadn't. But that's something that did concern me.
Larry, you're right, and your instincts are absolutely correct. Typically what happens is when cures or prescription type issues, solutions are announced to the public, the fraudsters create a lot of websites to sell these medical cures or supplies. We saw it with masks, we saw it with ventilators, and like you're finding, you're seeing it with certain vitamins and prescriptions that are out there. The websites, the fraudsters want to create these websites to direct you to their particular website so they can collect your payment data and your personal information so they can capitalize that on that. But you see that every single time.
Well, let's talk about what data is particularly risky. And obviously, Lori, you're, I'm sure, extremely familiar with the risks both to the individual, but also to the issuers of people who are misusing credit and debit cards. So let's talk about the risks and also the protections that are built in to credit and debit cards. And I'd like you to address credit and debit separately because I know they have different levels of protection.
Sure. Yeah. From a data perspective, as consumers, we should be well aware that there is an immense amount of data that has been compromised over the last years about us as US consumers. And so being vigilant, as we are speaking about being vigilant, is critical to protecting various fraudsters from getting access to monetizing that data that they have about us. With regard to protections built in to Visa products, we have what's called a zero liability policy. And essentially what that means is that as cardholders are victims of counterfeit or other types of fraud, Visa products come with a zero liability policy, which means that you as a consumer can dispute that transaction with your issuer, be it a credit union or a bank. The issuer is the entity, the financial institution that issued that credit to you. That is separate from federal regulations, however. So federal regulations such as Regulation E or Regulation Z for debit or credit, those are separately managed from Visa. Visa has a zero liability policy, and the federal regulations that banks and credit unions need to follow for debit and credit card just describe the timelines and the way in which they manage getting credit back to those cardholders based upon the type of dispute.
So with a credit card, if there is a charge, of course, that money is your money, it's Visa or the bank's money until you pay the bill. And so all you have to do is dispute the charge and they will immediately suspend it. With a debit card, it's my understanding, I don't use debit cards, but a lot of people do, of course. With a debit card, it's my understanding that comes out of your account immediately. Is that correct?
It does.
And so are you guaranteed that it will be put back in your account? And how long does that take? Because some people are living close to the edge and may not be able to afford that loss for very long.
Sure, thanks for the question. The way in which individual banks and credit unions manage fraud disputes is going to vary. The federal regulation for debit disputes is Regulation E. Visa, you should know, Visa does not counsel our issuers on federal regulations. This is not our place. But the guidelines do state that an issuer, a bank or credit union, has a certain number of days to research and do an investigation on that dispute to determine if it's a legitimate dispute, and then provide provisional credit. So yes, you're correct that a debit transaction, those monies are going to be removed from the account immediately. And credit they are as well, but credit, it's not your own money, right? You're borrowing that money.
Right, so and when you dispute it, the issuer is responsible to suspend the charges until the issue has been resolved. It may be resolved not in your favor, so you may actually still be on the hook, but if it is resolved in your favor, and I've had that both ways in my experience, I've had some resolved in my favor, some I've been told, nope, sorry, you're on the hook. Tom, let's talk about enforcement and what people should do if they feel that they have been victimized by some type of financial crime.
Yeah, so the first thing that you should do if you feel you're a victim is to call your local police department or sheriff's office and file a report, because that's going to be important to start the investigation and document that instance of fraud. The Secret Service, like you said early on, has a presence in financial crimes, and we have our Electronic Crimes Task Force here in San Francisco, and we are poised to really look at and prioritize anything COVID-19 related. Not just the Secret Service, the FBI, but all federal agencies, to include the U.S. Attorney here for the Northern District of California. This is our top priority at this moment. So you've contacted us and provided your information, and that'll get the ball rolling for us to identify those websites or those fraudsters.
So I have two follow-up questions. One is, I'm sure they're getting better, but historically, not all local police departments were particularly tech savvy. And I've heard many reports of people calling their local police department and not getting the kind of technical knowledge on behalf of, from the officers as one would hope. And again, I know it's getting better over time as everybody becomes more tech savvy. So that's one concern. And the second concern, I think a lot of people are really skeptical of whether or not their complaint, whether it's to the FBI or the Secret Service or the local police or whomever, is going to get the attention that they want it to get, because you may have bigger fish to fry. You may be dealing with billion-dollar fraud deals or other terrorist attacks and things like that. And is my $20 charge really going to be a priority for you?
Well, to your first question, yes, the local police departments and sheriff's office their capabilities have grown immensely over the last decade with training and equipment. So they're ready to investigate this type of financial fraud. The second question, yes, every little bit helps in creating a picture for us in law enforcement. So you may feel that you just lost $20 on this transaction, but reporting that information to a place like the Center for Disaster Fraud, which was created after Hurricane Katrina, starts building a picture for law enforcement. So you may be alone, but you may feel you're alone, but you're one of many. And that we start compiling that data and zeroing in on those particular criminals. So yes, it's important because it's just a piece of the puzzle.
Laura, I'm going to ask this of you, and perhaps Tom may want to weigh in later as well. We've talked about the danger of having your credit card out there. I think it's obvious that if your card is out there, there is a possibility somebody can make a fraudulent charge. Now, educate me as to what information the fraudsters would need besides just the card number. Do they need the expiration date? Do they need the CSV number, if that's correct, the number on the back of the card, those 3 digits? Or is simply having the credit card number sufficient for them to steal your money?
Right, so it depends on the way in which they want to transact. If they're using the card at the point of sale in a physical environment, going to a store, they will need the contents of the magstripe data on the back of that card, and that's what's been involved in many of the merchant breaches that we've seen. And they can easily replicate a piece of plastic to use that card at the point of sale. To make a transaction over the internet in what we would call card not present scenario, just having the 16-digit PAN and the expiration date can typically get them access to websites and to merchant stores who aren't collecting that 3-digit code on the back of the card. Some merchants do, some merchants don't. So it really depends on the merchant.
And if a merchant asks for it, should you give it, or is that that is something that you are required to give?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if they're asking for it, there is a chance that data has not been involved in breaches. So in the case of big merchant breaches, there's some data collected and not other data collected. So that additional piece of data may not be something that the fraudsters have access to. When it comes to fraudsters and perpetrating fraud and monetizing the data that they do have, they have gotten immensely sophisticated at getting access to more pieces of data to complete the picture of what they have in order to successfully monetize what they do have.
I'm actually going to ask a little more detail on that in a minute, but as long as you were talking about, you mentioned the process of going into a store with a fraudulent card. Is that skimming, where you somehow get the actual encoded data from the magnetic stripe? Correct. And then use that?
Yes, that's one way to get it. Merchant breaches are another way to get it, where merchants' host systems have been compromised. So yes, skimming very easy way to get stolen, to take that magstripe data that's available that will allow you to recreate a card or for merchant breaches.
And is the chip, many of the newer cards have chips on them now. Does that offer you a
Correct.
greater level of protection?
Absolutely. This is why we have moved the US market to chip since 2015, because that chip has a cryptogram, and each time that card is placed into a chip terminal, it creates a unique value, a dynamic piece of data that's new and unique for each transaction. And that's where the ability to keep that transaction safe comes from.
Although I haven't been there lately, I travel to Europe quite a bit. And in Europe, there are two things that I've noticed that are different than what we get here. Number one, if you're in a restaurant, they almost always come to you with a terminal. So you don't have to hand your card and have the waiter take it in the back of the room doing who knows what with it.
Right.
And the second is that you don't sign, well, you do if you're an American, but if you have a European issued card, they have chip and PIN. So you present the card and then you type in a secret PIN at that terminal, which strikes me as a better solution than we have here. And I'm curious if that's going to come to the United States.
Every market goes about things in different ways and has different technology and capabilities. I mean, that's the beauty about the way in which it's rolled out. It's whatever works for whatever market. In the US market, we are definitely what we call chip and choice. Restaurants do not necessarily have terminals that they're bringing to your table. So that tends to work that way in the United States. Also, prior to chip, many merchants didn't have PIN pads. To force PIN upon people
Right.
don't want to keep a PIN or don't know their PIN. In the US, our consumers have many different card products. I can tell you, I have no idea what my PIN is on my credit card. So would not want to use a PIN transaction. So it's the dynamics of each market that drive the solutions. And in the US, we're definitely chip and choice.
Well, in Switzerland, I couldn't buy a train ticket from a kiosk because it required a PIN. I had to go into the office and do it the old-fashioned way. Tom, we've talked a little bit about credit cards, but there's a lot of other data that can be used to harm you financially. Obviously, Social Security number is one. Could you talk about some of the other forms of information that we should try to protect because of their use in identity theft and fraud?
Yeah, great question. So your Social Security number is so important to protect. You never want to give that over the phone or online unless you're going to the source. Your date of birth, your mother's maiden name, everything that we use to open our credit, you want to protect like you're guarding the president or your life.
Well, of course, and the exception, of course, is there are times when you have to. For example, if you're opening a bank account and you're certain it's a legitimate bank, you are required to enter your Social Security number, credit checks. There are some areas where it's necessary, but most of the time, even your doctor's office, the doctor I go to has a routine form you're supposed to fill out every 6 months, and it asks you for your Social Security number. And I wrote down, you don't need to know this because my insurance company does know it. You don't need to know it. So so there are some exceptions if I understand it, right?
You're right, because it could, at your medical office, it could do with your insurance coverage. You don't want to prevent that. But yeah, you are at the source. Something you want to think about, and Lori mentioned it, the complexity of the fraudsters and the information that they can buy off the dark web for cents on the dollar, Larry, it's alarming. It doesn't take a lot of money to buy a Social Security number on the dark web. So like Lori's saying, the profile is being built on you, and they're very sophisticated as far as where you bank, what your credit cards are, what your address is, so they can call into a bank or into a credit card and obtain a lot of sensitive data about you just based on what they can buy online.
Well, let's talk about phishing and spear phishing, because I have a feeling we're going to see a fair amount of phishing. And phishing, as many of you know, is when somebody sends you typically an email or perhaps a social media message and says maybe your bank needs to verify your password, so you need to log in, or here's an offer that you're going to love, just click here, et cetera. And they often look exactly like legitimate sites. You go there, it looks like it's really your bank or your insurance company or some other legitimate source, but in fact, it's a fraudster, and what they're trying to do is get credentials, perhaps your login credentials or other information, so they can victimize you. Talk about how you can recognize a phishing attack from what might be a legitimate request by an organization to get you to log in.
Well, it typically would come in the form of an unusual email from your bank or your financial institution. You will see some grammatical errors in the English and the syntax in the body of the email. And then
Sometimes.
sometimes, not always. It depends how, you're right.
Yeah.
But it depends how sophisticated it is. What we tell consumers and businesses is to never link or click on any link or attachment in those emails. If you're interested in pursuing that special or that offer, is to go directly to the financial institution or to the credit card company or to the business. And that way you avoid being redirected to a phishing site that may collect all your information.
Lori, I mean, I think that Tom gave very good advice, but the fact is that every day I do get an email from one of my banks or credit card companies, legitimate ones, because I check, I look for the URL, I make sure if it's coming from Bank of America, it's bankofamerica.com, not Bank of America at paymycreditcard.com or whatever.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
so they are still doing that. And I actually wonder whether that's bad practice for them to encourage us to click on links. Of course, it's convenient, but it does kind of scare me sometimes when I get these. How can I be sure that they're legitimate?
Right. So, well, to your point, examining the URL that this is coming from is critical. So yes, we all get offers and emails and, you know, drawing your attention to something from businesses, financial institutions that we all do business with, and examining that URL is critical to ensuring that you're not falling for a fraudster's phishing attempt.
And it's so easy for them to just create a URL that looks like maybe it's legitimate, but you should know the actual URL of every institution you deal with.
Right, absolutely. And the level of sophistication, which I mentioned earlier, is really off the chart. So when it comes to phone-based phishing, what we're seeing now and we're hearing loud and clear from our bank and credit union partners in the US is that these fraudsters are spoofing the bank or credit union phone number when they are calling a consumer. So I mentioned all of this data at risk and on the dark web. These fraudsters have bits and pieces of data on us, and their analytics capabilities are quite sophisticated. So they know our mobile phone number, they know our 16-digit account number, they know where we do our banking, and they have enough information to reach us and spoof that bank phone number to attempt to get more information, to either to do a full account takeover where they're looking for our login credentials to our financial institution, or they're looking for that CVV2 code on the back of the card to then further monetize what they have, or the PIN. In many cases, these fraudsters are asking for the PIN, or to capitalize on the two-factor authentication that financial institutions do by sending a one-time passcode to get access to that one-time passcode because they're trying to change a passcode.
So let me understand that, because I've always considered two-factor authentication to be a pretty good tool. It's kind of like an ATM. You've got two things you got to do. You got to have, but you're saying that even that, there are ways that fraudsters can get through by
they're requesting it.
Yeah.
So in a phone phishing scam, they are spoofing the issuer phone number, the bank or credit union phone number, and if they've attempted to log on to something, whether it be a tokenized mobile application, or whether it be the bank website or a mobile banking application, in order to complete that, the issuer, the bank, will send a one-time passcode to the legitimate cardholder. So the fraudster may be trying to get at that code by requesting it and saying that they are calling from the bank or credit union to request that code because they don't have the missing piece of information.
And they would never ask for that information.
And that's the key message that we're trying to get out at, is that banks and credit unions do not call us consumers and ask for what we call personally identifiable information, PII. They don't call and ask us for that information. Right.
And even they don't know that information. It's embedded and encrypted into their online services, so that no legitimate online service actually knows your password. The software has a hashed version of it.
Stored, correct.
So Tom, I know you work for the Secret Service and not the IRS, but when did the IRS start calling taxpayers up on the phone and asking for payment in iTunes cards? That seems like a very interesting way to collect taxes.
It sure is. They have, Larry, to your point, they have never called taxpayers on the phone. You will get an envelope in the mail with a tax bill from the IRS. So you will never get a call from the government asking for your personal data. They already have it. They already have your address, and they don't need to collect it. What we're more concerned about is really stemming and curbing the fraud curve here in the COVID-19 disaster. So we want to get the information out, like you're pointing out, robocalls, to hang up on them. They're no good.
Yeah, yeah, and in fact, most of the time I do hang up on telemarketers, but if for any reason I might either be interested or just want to mess with them, I always ask them if I can call them back, and the next thing you hear is a click.
Yeah.
But if they are legitimate, they will give you a number to call back.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And we've seen a lot of fraud early on that appeared to come from the World Health Organization or from the CDC or from other reputable nonprofits or donation companies. And a lot of them tend to be fraud.
Well, that brings up another thing too. During this time of crisis, many of us do want to help out our nonprofits that we support that are dealing with this issue, or maybe helping homeless people or whatever they're doing. And that is a big source of fraud. How do we know if we get a pitch from a nonprofit, whether it's legitimate and safe to donate, or whether we should be extra careful because it could be a fraudster?
Like you said, Larry, you can call back, ask for that phone number to call them directly. It can be hit or miss. We always say, go directly to the source. Use your search engines and find the organization you want to donate to, and then use that as your entry for providing help to this.
And even with the search engines, be very careful about looking at the web address, the URL. If it's Chase Bank, it's going to be www or something, actually https chase.com, not some derivative of that. So do be very careful. Another issue I think is concerning me is the whole idea of how people are getting information. And I know this is not financial fraud, but it's still very important. Information about COVID-19 cures, preventive measures. I've seen everything from drinking bleach, which, by the way, I want to be very clear, you should never do. It is never safe. To certain vitamins and other claims that have been made. And again, I know this is not financial fraud necessarily. Well, it could be financial fraud because they may be trying to sell you something that is specifically not proven to work or could be harmful. How do we process that if we see information advising us to do something? How can we be sure that's legitimate and not a crazy idea?
Yeah, it's difficult because people are looking for that quick fix. If you're looking for a medical cure, you need to go to your medical provider and ask those questions directly. They can provide you sources for those medicines. Always, if the message is here, go directly to the best source available. Do not use information that you find online or on social media as your primary source for keeping your financial and your personal health intact.
Mm-hmm. Lori, do you want to add something from that from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's go to the source. The outreach that happens during times of emergency is ripe for fraudsters to get in there. They're looking for your guard to be down. Everybody wants a magic answer, and during times of emotion and sort of instability in terms of what's going to happen next, go to the source is the best advice. So I echo Tom's advice there.
And I might want to add that, especially when it comes to information, they're not necessarily fraudsters. They may just be people who genuinely believe that this is the best approach. I mean, for whatever reason. I mean, maybe, whatever reason they believe this, and whether and I would want to know what is their medical training, who they are, and I would prefer to go to CDC or World Health Organization or my own personal physician or the county health director or some other source of information that I know is reputable versus somebody who might or might not know what they're talking about. So, big issue. Any other thoughts before we wrap up on terms of how we can protect ourselves during this very difficult period that we're all going through? I mean, we want to protect our money. We want to protect well, I'll give you another issue I want to bring up because it's just making mistakes. So a lot of us may be going into our financial, our Visa, our Fidelity or Schwab or whatever accounts we have, and maybe doing something to rebalance our portfolios, and be very careful. Don't accidentally sell when you mean to buy. Make sure you're writing the right quantity in there. It's very possible to make a mistake that is irreversible, especially if you're trading during the market. You can't undo a market trade. So any other advice? And this isn't so relevant because people aren't purchasing travel, but I've accidentally booked planes for the wrong months in the wrong airport. And sometimes you can get that money back, sometimes you can't. But so just being careful is also very important during this period.
Yeah, Larry, what I've been saying a lot is the same social distancing that we're using for our public health, you should be using for your financial health. So you have to be really, really careful about who you're doing business, both in person and online. This is an unprecedented time in our nation. You know, $2 trillion worth of stimulus is going to go out. By comparison, the losses for Sandy were 75 billion.
Yep.
For Katrina was 108 billion. The victims were less than 2,000 for those two disasters combined. The number of people that can be victimized as part of COVID-19 is it's innumerable. It's just there's so many people that could be falling victim to criminals at this time.
And I'm glad you raised the issue of the stimulus package, because many people are going to be getting eventually checks from the government, but I could easily see how fraudsters might take advantage of those expectations and say, if you give us our credit card, we'll credit to your account or something like that. So I think people need to be careful again that they just deal with the legitimate sources, which in this case, I assume would be the IRS.
That's correct.
At irs.gov, not irs.anything else.
Correct.
Any last comments before we let you go?
From a Visa perspective and protecting from card fraud, just for consumers to remember, your bank or credit union is not going to call you with asking for your personal information. Keep your guard up. This is when the fraudsters get active. They're very smart. They're spoofing these phone numbers. And if you have any questions, you call your bank or credit union back. That is when they authenticate you by asking for personal pieces of information that they can validate against.
Exactly. Tom, any last words before we let you go?
No, Lori said it well. And Larry, you've brought up some great points, and hopefully everybody walks away with some good information.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on Connect Safely Live. Come back on Thursday at 10 o'clock. We're going to have Antigone Davis, who's the global head of safety for Facebook. Facebook is also on the front lines of this issue when it comes to information, misinformation, and all the good things and bad things associated with how we're dealing with this crisis. I want to thank my guest, Thomas Edwards from the U.S. Secret Service, and Lori Hodges from Visa. Thank you again, and see you all on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you.